U.S. Arab Radio Network presents Season 3 of the Ray Hanania Radio Show, sponsored by Arab News, the leading English language newspaper in the Middle East. Each Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, veteran journalist Ray Hanania explores issues facing Arab Americans on WNZK AM 690 radio in Detroit and on WDMV AM 700 radio in Washington, D.C. And now, your host, Ray Hanania. Watch the show live on Arab News Facebook page.
And welcome to the Ray Hanania Radio Show, May 24th, 2023, Season 3, Episode 4. Our topics: growing popularity of Arabic language in America, and a second discussion segment, involvement of Arab Americans in the 2024 Democratic Presidential Convention. Our first guests are Senior Pew Research Center Demographer Jeffrey Passel and researcher Mohamad Moslimani. They co-authored a new study detailing 5 facts about Arabic speakers in the United States. And then afterwards, we will talk with Jim Zogby, the founder and president of the Arab American Institute at Washington, D.C. based organization that serves as a political and policy research arm of the Arab American community. He led the effort to get Arab Americans a voice in past Democratic presidential conventions and is planning efforts again for the 2024 summer convention that's going to take place in Chicago. This Ray Hanania show is broadcast every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, and we invite you to enjoy our first interview that we're going to put up here right in 1 second. We'll get this going. And here it is. Welcome back to the radio show. I want to welcome my guests now, Jeffrey Passel and Mohamad Moslimani. They're going to speak about a new Pew Research Center study on the number of Americans who speak Arabic in the United States, which has increased dramatically since 1990. 2/3 of Arabic speakers, according to the report in America, are immigrants. And the report also has many conclusions that we're going to explore, but it talks about the growth in the number of Arabic speakers has easily outpaced growth among speakers of several other languages from the Middle East, such as Persian, Farsi, Hebrew, and Turkish. Jeffrey Passel is a senior demographer at Pew Research Center and is a nationally known expert on immigration to the U.S. Mohamad Moslimani is a research assistant focusing on race and ethnicity at Pew Research Center, who co-authored the report with Passel. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining the radio show.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Well, first of all, tell us about the analysis that Pew Research Center did, which is based on census data, as I understand it, on Americans who speak Arabic. What did you find generally?
Well, first, as you said, we found a dramatic increase over the last 30 to 40 years in the number of Arabic speakers. And this is people who speak Arabic at home. There may be other people who speak Arabic, but this is a question specifically asking about people who speak it at home. And the number has increased from about 200,000, a little over 200,000 in 1980, up to almost 1.5 million by 2021. A very dramatic increase. A lot of it's been driven by immigration from Arabic-speaking countries, mostly in the Middle East. And as you noted, a majority of those who speak Arabic at home are immigrants. About 2/3 of those are immigrants. And if you just look at adults, about 3/4 are immigrants. They come from a lot of different countries. There's no one country that provides the largest number, but both Iraq and Egypt account for 13% of all the Arabic speakers, Lebanon at 7%, and then smaller shares from other countries. While there are Arabic speakers around the country, the largest concentration in terms of share of the population is in the Detroit metro area, where The Detroit metro area accounts for 13% of all the Arabic speakers in the country, and almost 5% of the people in the metropolitan area speak Arabic at home. And that by far is the largest share of any of the metropolitan areas in the country.
Now, obviously, this is going to sound like the same question, but it's the nuance is a little different. What's the conclusions about what all this means? Not what you find, but what does it actually mean that more people are speaking Arabic? And Jeff, if you want to talk, and then maybe if Mohamad has some perspective on it too.
There's a couple of things to consider. One is we're continuing to get, we've gotten a lot of immigration, and the immigration has slowed for a variety of reasons, but we're still continuing to get immigrants. And this is a notable population. But it's also worth noting that a majority of the people who speak Arabic at home also are proficient in English. About 2/3 are proficient in English. So we're getting these immigrants and a growing number of people speaking Arabic, but they speak English as well.
And Mohamad, I don't know if you have a perspective on that. How do you look at what is the significance of this polling? What does it say about the Arab and Muslim community?
So I don't know that I have much to add about the Arab and Muslim community. The interesting thing about this piece is that it doesn't ask necessarily whether individuals are Arab or identify as Arab. It just asks if they speak Arabic at home. But I would point to the finding that Jeff shared that I think is notable to some degree, that since 1980, greater and greater shares of Arabic speakers in the US are now proficient in English. I think that's notable because it might indicate to some degree what's changing about the demographics of Arabic speakers in the US.
Do we know what factors are driving this surge in Arabic speaking in the US, or is it just the immigration? It just reflects a growing Arabic immigration to this country.
I think the major factor for Arabic and for a lot of other languages is the immigrants themselves coming. In addition to the immigrants, the children of the US born children of those immigrants often grow up speaking Arabic, and in many instances, there's a desire to retain the language of the parents. So a lot of the US born who speak Arabic are probably children themselves of immigrants, or people who married immigrants, US born people who married immigrants. We can't get at a lot of those factors with this. All it asks is, do you speak a language other than English at home? But it's clear that the immigration is a major factor in driving the growth.
I know that the report that you and Mohamad did suggests that 2/3 of the people who speak Arabic are actually immigrants. But that remaining 1/3, are they the children of immigrants, or are they Americans who, for example, that are not Arabic or don't speak Arabic, who happen to want to learn it? In other words, is there an interest among non-Arabs and non-Muslims to speak Arabic?
Well, again, we can't really tell very much from this. Most of the adults, we don't know whether the US born adults are children of immigrants because they don't ask that question. This is in some ways a fairly narrow question. It doesn't ask if you speak Arabic or if you can read Arabic. It asks if you speak it at home. There are clearly people who speak and read Arabic but may not speak it at home. And so this is a kind of narrow question on about languages spoken at home.
We know that a lot of this data comes from the US Census. And yet for Arabs, I mean, for years, I remember trying to get included in the census as an Arab. And now there's a push to include us as MENA, Middle East and North Africa. But none of the legislation I've seen actually says Arab. How do you rely on the U.S. Census, which some people would say is flawed? I'm not sure there's a lot of other data out there other than the data that's provided by the census. How do we assess all this, given what some people would say is a flawed system in the census?
It's difficult. First of all, one of the advantages of this survey, it's called the American Community Survey, is it's got a huge sample. The sample we analyzed for this report had 3.3 million people in the sample. You just can't get that scale of data. And what that enables you to do is get at groups that are relatively small. While the number of people who speak Arabic at home is 1.5 million, that's only about 0.5% of the US population. So if you have a smaller survey, it's going to be very difficult to identify those people. But one of the things that we at the Pew Research Center have tried to do, and the Census Bureau has tried to do as well, is to test these questions and see who it is we're identifying and investigating the best ways to collect information on people's identity. And yes, the Census Bureau is considering adding a question on MENA, Middle East, North Africa, adding a category into the race question. And so with that question, people who want to identify as Arab will be able to. They'll be able to either check a box or write it in, and there's a separate category for it. Right now, you're exactly right. We have to rely on other types of data and other questions to get at these various dimensions of identity. Language is part of it. You're exactly right. Some communities don't trust the Census Bureau. They work very hard to get people to respond. And there's not always the right question there to identify people. The language one is a fairly straightforward question, but you're right, it only gets at one dimension of identity. It picks up people who speak this language, speak Arabic or some other language at home. And it's not, and that's only one dimension of identity as well.
As you mentioned, there are 5 points, and I think you touched on them. The 5th point I thought was interesting, though. It said that about 2/3 of Arabic speakers, or 66%, are proficient in English, which is up from 54% in 1980. How does that, do we know how that compares with other immigrant groups? I mean, in terms of their proficiency, is that low? Proficiency in English, is that 66% low or high?
It's among the higher proficiencies. The people who speak other languages, the proficiency is increased, but not as much as it increased among Arabic speakers, and the English proficiency is a bit lower for speakers of other languages. That varies some by language, of course, but as a group, the Arabic speakers are slightly more proficient in English than other languages.
I was going to say, thank you for sharing that figure. That figure is actually for all Arabic speakers, but when you look just at immigrants, their proficiency has gone up from 47% in 1980 to 57% in 2021. If you compare that to immigrants who speak another non-English language at home, it went up from 39% to 44% in 2021. So actually, as Jeff was saying, among immigrants who speak a non-English language at home, Arabic-speaking immigrants have higher levels of English proficiency than immigrants who speak other non-English languages. There is a question on ancestry or maybe birthplace, but unfortunately, the ancestry variable, people put in a lot of responses to it. So sometimes with regard to the ancestry question, people may not respond necessarily with nationality or ethnicity. They might respond with a sort of pan-ethnic label. So some people might say Lebanese, and some people might say Arab or Middle Eastern. And so sometimes with this data, as Jeff was saying, it's a little bit hard to get at.
The other questions I have, one is, the impact of the fear factor that exists in the United States. You know, the way Arabs and people who speak Arabic, whether they're Arab or non-Arab, they're often portrayed in such negative ways. To me, it's kind of interesting that the number of people speaking Arabic have increased because we've seen so many reports about travelers who are on airplanes who may speak Arabic. And you hear these stories about how other passengers get upset and concerned. They instead of taking off, they ask the passengers to leave the planes. I'm not saying this happens every day, but it's on the minds of some people. Does that fear factor at all play in any way in terms of this rise in the number of people speaking Arabic? In other words, if it wasn't there, do you think it would be more Americans that would be speaking Arabic?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think there's a kind of data perspective that I can offer on that. And one is that you talked about the quality of the data and how it's collected. The Census Bureau works very hard to assure people that the answers they give are going to be kept confidential. So I think in some ways, the fact that we're seeing these numbers going up the way they are is in part attributable to the Census Bureau's efforts there. But on the other hand, I think there may well be people who declined to answer or didn't want to say they spoke Arabic because responses were going to the government. So it is probably the case that there are more people who speak Arabic than what we've seen for a variety of reasons. One is people choosing not to answer it, and the other is maybe the Census Bureau didn't reach all of the people they did, but they do. It's commendable that they're able to get these data, but there's a likelihood that there's more.
Can the context that you think of speaking Arabic be put into a larger context of Americans who speak other languages? In other words, have there been other studies, of other second languages that we can compare this to? Is this a high number compared to people who speak German or Italian, for example, or Spanish? Is there a way to compare that, or is it just the acceleration of the number of people who are speaking that really reflects what's important about this poll, that more people are speaking it?
I believe this is the seventh most common non-English language spoken at home. Some of the others have a lot more speakers, Spanish, of course, being one of them. But it's a reflection of recent immigration, and I think the other factors you previously mentioned is that the ties to Islam and the Quran clearly make it an important language for people to speak. And you mentioned German, you mentioned Italian. Those numbers are going down, partly because we're not getting as many immigrants from those countries, and the people have been here longer. But this is a very rapidly growing much faster than a number of other languages from the Middle East.
All right. Any final thoughts from either of you, Jeffrey Passel or Mohamad Moslimani?
Well, this is part of a piece. We have a new center that's focused on racial and ethnic identity, and we're doing work in a variety of areas, and this is one piece of it. And we're hoping to get more data to address some of this as the Census Bureau works with their questions and their framework, so that we can address other dimensions than just simply language. It's a focus on racial and ethnic identity. And so we have expanded the work that the Pew Research Center has done, mainly looking at public opinion, people's attitudes on a variety of issues, their identity, their attitudes towards politics, their attitudes towards work, and a whole range of issues. But we've expanded our focus on the African American community. We've had a long focus on the Latino community. We're focusing on the Asian American community, and we hope to expand that work further as we move forward.
All right. I want to thank both of my guests, Jeffrey Passel, Senior Demographer at Pew Research Center, nationally known expert on immigration to the U.S. and the demography of racial and ethnic groups, and Mohamad Moslimani, a research assistant who also focuses on race and ethnicity at the Pew Research Center. Together, they co-authored this report on the language and the increase and the growth of the Arabic language in the United States. You can visit the Pew Research Center at pewresearch.org, and you'll be able to find some documents on it, especially this 5 facts about Arabic speakers in the U.S. that Mohamad Moslimani published there, that summarizes and gives a brief of this report. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It really was very interesting.
Well, thank you for inviting us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome. All right, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll do our interview with Jim Zogby. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
In a perfect world, everyone would be a perfect driver.
Hands at 9 and 3, everyone.
9 and 3.
Everyone would follow all the rules.
Please, go ahead and merge. I'll make room.
Thank you, fellow driver.
And nothing unexpected would ever happen. Even the squirrels would know the right time to safely cross the road. In this perfect world, you wouldn't have to wear a seatbelt. But in case you hadn't noticed, we don't live in a perfect world. About 1,000 people in Michigan die each year in vehicle crashes, and thousands more are injured. Wearing your seatbelt reduces your risk of death in a crash by 45% in a car and by 60% in a pickup truck. So until we find a perfect world to drive in, make our imperfect world safer by buckling up. A message from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety Planning.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
I want to welcome my guest, Jim Zogby, the founder and president of the Arab American Institute, a Washington, D.C. based organization that serves as a political and policy research arm of the Arab American community. He led the effort to get Arab Americans a voice in past Democratic presidential conventions and is planning efforts again for this summer's Democratic convention in Chicago, August 19th through the 22nd. Jim, welcome to the radio show.
Thank you very much, Ray.
It's always a pleasure to have you on there. You have such I remember working with you going back into the 70s, which shows that there's a quality and knowledge about politics that makes you so valuable in our community. You've been involved with the Democratic National Committee for many years and have organized Arab involvement in the past Democratic Party conventions. Can you tell us about that? And what role do you think Arabs might be able to play in the upcoming Democratic convention in Chicago this summer?
Well, I'm going to just do a bit of a going back in history. I was in Jesse Jackson's deputy campaign manager in '84. I was at a dinner. He comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder, and leans over and says to me, "I want you to join my campaign." And I said, "But Reverend, I've been organizing the Arab community for the last 4 years. I was running ADC at the time." And he said, "We'll do more for your people in the next 4 months than you were able to do in the last 4 years." We talked about it and ultimately decided that I would take a leave from ADC and do it. And he was right, because we'd never been involved in a presidential campaign before. There had been Syrians for Carter, Lebanese for Reagan. There'd never been an Arab American effort, and even in '84, after the Jackson campaign, when a group of Arab Americans gave money to Mondale, he gave the money back, and they were they were very well known. They were St. Jude folks, most of them from this group from Chicago. They were on the St. Jude's board. But he was told to give the money back, and he did. It was heartbreaking to them and infuriating to us. But what I did find in the campaign was that people turned out in record numbers to rallies and do all that stuff. And they were excited that he was there talking to them, talking about them, mentioning the Arab American community's name. And so after we had the ruckus at ADC and we had a bit of a rupture, not a bit, but a rupture. We decided we're going to, what we'll do is we'll just continue what we did in '84 and make it into a focused organization. Voter registration, mobilizing the vote, getting candidates to Arab Americans to run and be involved in public service, and bringing our issue in the political mainstream. And so we did. We launched the Institute in '85. We had one of our founding meetings in Chicago, with our eye toward '88 and how we were going to mobilize Arab Americans before '88. Well, we got sidetracked because the mayor of Dearborn ran on a platform, what to do about the Arab problem. They're not like us. They don't share our values, and they're ruining our darn good way of life. So we focused on Dearborn, voter registration, et cetera, and it turned out quite successful. But by the time we got to '88, we had an idea. And that was to focus not only on mobilizing the community and getting them to run for delegate and win, but also to bring our issues into the Democratic state conventions. And we passed pro-Palestinian statehood resolutions in 10 states. We had a part of the Jackson platform at the national convention. And we actually had the first ever national debate on Palestine from the podium of the convention, as I introduced the minority plank on Palestine at the convention. But more important to me was that we had 80 plus Arab American delegates. Wow. The previous high had been 4. We were now at 80. And that was how successful our efforts were to get people to run. We had a big event at the convention that year in Atlanta, in the rooftop of one of the big hotels there. We had every convention since then. We've done an Arab American cultural event that has been just great. People have loved it. And we've had an issue forum where we've talked about issues that have also been incredibly well attended. Focused on, almost always focused on Palestine, on issues of importance there. And so the combination of making sure that we had delegates in large enough numbers to matter, an event that highlighted our culture, and a policy forum that focused on our issues has been the way we've done it. Since I've been the chair of the Ethnic Council, we've also had Arab Americans participate in the broader ethnic effort. And so what we're planning for this year's convention, next year's convention rather, is a Taste of Chicago ethnic fair, where we're going to advertise, here's the Polish restaurants and the Irish restaurants and the Arab restaurants and the Italian restaurants, and create a sense that the ethnic communities of Chicago have a real role to play in the party. Because, you know, you're from Chicago, you know how polarized black and white is. Well, I remember Harold Washington telling me in '85, everybody sees it black and white. He said, I see a lot of shades of tan and brown and tan and gray. And every group's got a name and they just want you to call it out. And so I'm not willing to just surrender to the black-white scenario. I want ethnic groups there, the Swedish Museum, the neighborhoods of Chicago, each one of which has a unique cultural heritage. I want delegates to focus on that. And the Arab community will be a key part of that, you know? And so we'll try to do an event in the heart of the Arab community to bring delegates there. The food will be great, the dance and music will be great, and so too will all the other ethnic groups have their events, and we'll be a part of it. And hopefully we'll get a bunch of delegates too.
I remember in 1988 was critical in the Arab American community because you inspired me to run for the legislature in 1992. I didn't win, but the following year I ran for School District 230 in the southwest suburbs, where the Arab population was only 10% of the school district, but they were 90% of the expulsions. We didn't win. Miriam Zayed, we then slated her with your help 3 times. We were not able to win, but I wanted to just let you know during this broadcast that last April we did elect an Arab American member, Mohamad Jabber, to the District 230 school board. And it was a long road, but it began with what you started in 1988.
Thank you.
And that's amazing.
And you got a state rep now.
And we have a state rep, Abdul Nasser Rashid. So we're slowly growing, but does it pain you?
And the mayor of Dearborn is now Arab American.
We interviewed Abdullah Hamoud. He's a phenomenal
And the mayor
guy.
of Patterson, New Jersey is Arab American. And that was another city where they were literally, the community was pissed on, right?
Prospect Park, Mohammed Khairullah.
Yeah, and what do you call it? They got Main Street in Patterson's now been named Palestine Way.
Yeah, that things work. But now cities like Chicago are tough though, because they're so big and numbers actually mean something. But you pointed out what I think is really critical about these conventions. You got to identify and elect delegates across the country, not just obviously in Illinois. Then you got to come up with a platform in the process with these delegates. How difficult was that to get started? And do you envision that, in given our circumstances today, all the tensions and things, will it be difficult at this convention to replicate what's been done at prior conventions?
No, I don't think so, because, you know, there are, we've just done a poll of Arab Americans. There are tensions in the community, there's no question. But I got started in this work during the Lebanon Civil War, when, you know, you had the largest group of people of Arab descent were Lebanese, and they were out for blood, killing each other there and here. They were furious, and the Palestinians and Lebanese and Syrian, it was just a nightmare. And yet we were able to fuse together a community. Why? Because the children of the immigrants have a different mindset. The children of the immigrants, when they take the lead, they find common ground rather than the divisions that are of the folks who are, their feet are here, but their heads are back home, right, as they say. What we find today is something the same thing, is that the younger kids have a broader sense of being part of a community and look for common ground of issues of concern that are shared. And that's where we'll go. No, you know, if we get stuck with the Syrian opposition here, or the pro Hezbollah versus the pro this there, or the Fatah versus the Shabia, whatever, over, you know, Hamas, you never go anywhere at all. But when you deal with the generation of young Syrian, Lebanese, Palestinian, Egyptian, American kids here, or the ones who aren't so much kids, but they're focused on America and American politics, you get a very different mindset. So I don't think it'll be that difficult. And I think they want to get involved and they want to be a part of the process. And we'll do our darndest to facilitate it. And we have not, in any convention since that 88 one, we've never exceeded 80, but we've always hovered around 50. And so I'm sure we'll have our component, reasonable number of delegates, because young people are running and they care about it and they want to be involved in the process. They did last time, and they'll do it again.
I know you're a major voice in Democratic politics and with the White House, with the Biden administration. I wanted to ask you about when he unveiled the partnership with Arab Americans. When he was elected president, he made such strong statements and he did so much. He appointed 22 Arabs to his administration. He hosted the Eid celebrations. He recognized Arab American Heritage Month. One little flap, obviously, with the Prospect Park mayor, it was the Secret Service that said Mayor Mohammed Kharela couldn't attend the White House Eid reception that they just had. But I just want to ask you, when you look at what he unveiled as his partnership, and I know it's not easy, but has he delivered to our expectations, or are there still an uphill road that we have to traverse to get to where we think we should be?
Both. Still an uphill battle. But if I look at that agenda that he laid out in that incredible statement, which I was really pleased that they issued in the first place, it's a marker, it's a benchmark. You go from there. If we used baseball batting averages, he's doing pretty good. You're over 300, you're doing great.
It's huge.
If we use the free throw average in NBA, he'd be doing crappy. But there's enough pieces there that give me a sense that we've had an impact. But it's certainly not enough. And some of the big ones that we're looking for right now are they got to get rid of the profiling guidelines. Absolutely critical. To be honest, when you say about expectations, I never expected a whole lot. I didn't.
Wow.
On foreign policy, I didn't. And they have done their darndest to avoid taking a firm stand on Israel-Palestine. And I've never been one of those, there's always that, well, in a second term, he'll be free. Nonsense. These guys will do nothing of great consequence on this. This is up to us. This is up to us to continue to push and to elect more members of Congress that will make a difference on this issue. But these guys want to avoid it like a plague.
Is there a tipping point in politics where we could see a change? I mean, can you describe what that is, or is that what
I think
head
the
toward?
tipping point will be the year when we win more, we beat more of them than we lose, and we made a dent in the last couple of elections. They tried to defeat Rashida. They tried to defeat Summer Lee. They tried to defeat Cori Bush. But they did win with Marie. They defeated her, and they defeated Andy Levin and a couple of others and Nina Turner and others. They poured tens of millions into this to make it happen, to defeat the progressives that they defeated. I was just on a Zoom call with readers of my column, and they were saying, well, the poll numbers are looking, Democrats are very pro-Palestinian. They are, and that's huge, and it's really important. But the more the pressure the pro-Israel folks feel, the more pressure they feel, the more money they pour into snuffing it out. So imagine I'd say the chutzpah, but also the bizarre irony of that dodo Speaker of the House, McCarthy. He simply doesn't get how ironic it is that he kicked Palestinians out of a room and then turn the event into a pro-Israel celebration.
Wow.
I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
That's how dumb he is. But that's also how much pressure he was under from the pro-Israel crowd to do it. And they just thought, just fine. And the U.S. doesn't go to the Nakba celebration at the commemoration, rather, at the UN, because the Israelis tell them not to. The more opinion is changing in the world, the more pressure and the more money that they'll put into snuffing it out. But I think at some point they don't run out of money, but they run out of the ability to get that job done. And I do think it'll happen. I don't know what the tipping point is, but I know that we're moving in the right direction here.
And you mentioned former Congresswoman Marie Newman, who was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It took a while to understand her better in terms of, working with her, but she did great. She did lose the election, but part of that had to do with our non-presence in the U.S. Census, and which allowed the leadership on not just Democrats or Republicans, but the leadership in Illinois and across the country to divide up that 3rd district into 5. It was the largest concentration, according to the New York Times, of Arab and Palestinian voters. They divided it into 5 sections, really dividing our vote. What do we do with the census? What do we do with that? And explain something you explained to me. Putting MENA on the census is not the same as putting Arabs in the minority business enterprise category. Right. Sometimes they get mixed up, but they're 2 separate things.
Yeah. When I started with the census, back when I was at ABC, Helen Samhan and I were dealing with the census people. Back then, naively, we wanted an Arab category on the census. An African-American woman who was a fairly high official there, she came to us and she said, "You really don't." I said, "No, we want an Arab category." She said, "You don't, because if you get an Arab category, you'll lose about 60% of your count."
The support, in other words.
The count. In other words, if you only
our numbers.
If you only give them that option, they're not going to use it, because there are people who are 2nd, 3rd generation who still today are the largest component group of the Arab community. The Arab community aren't the 5 guys who had coffee at the Ahwi last night. They're not the guys who hang around, the on the corner on what Kidzi or whatever, whatever the street is where they're concentrated. That's not the community. The bulk of the community is still the 2nd, 3rd generation crowd. They are every bit as much a part of the community. If you want an accurate count, you got to get them. You got to get Ray LaHood in the count. If you don't get them, you lose 60% of your numbers. So we agreed with them to instead have an ethnicity question. What's your ancestry? And then that gave them some options. Well, the ancestry question is way too vague, and it never really worked. So what we've gotten them to do since the last census, which Trump ended up canceling, but now doing in this census, is to change the race question into a race and ethnicity question. So it will ask for race. Those are the affirmative action categories, but then it will ask a couple of ancestry questions that are different than race. So you can put Black, white, Hispanic, whatever, and then you can put white and you can put ancestry. And ancestry will give you, in the ancestry category, a MENA category, Middle East, North Africa. Now that will include everybody, Middle East, North Africa. It'll include Turkey, Iran, and Israel. We've gotten them to agree that the categories that they'll use as examples will be the largest categories in each one. So the largest one would be of the MENA would be the Lebanese. The largest in North Africa will be Egyptian. The largest of the non-Arab ones will be Turkey. The largest of the non-country specific ones will be Kurds. And that's how it will be framed. And then other. So you can put white, you can put MENA, and then you'll write in which one of the MENA groups you're in. Little complicated, but it's the best way we know to get an accurate number at the end of how many Arabs there are. Now,
I was going to say maybe because I've always been an activist, and really it comes through your inspiration. Believe me, Jim, you've inspired Arab American generations for many years, but I always am so proud of being identified as Arab. And I understand the MENA category, but in the Illinois legislation, they're saying, oh, it's going to recognize Arabs, but they don't use the word Arab in any of the text, any of the bill. To me, that's a problem. Why should I ignore that? Tell me why I should ignore it.
Here's what the census does. It counts then all those ethnicities. And actually they have in their screening 83 different categories that people have used in the past.
Right.
So you can put down Tripoli. You can put down Beirut if they ask for your ancestry. You can even put down Phoenician. What the census does when they give it back to us, they count them all Arab. So they actually do for us what we need to do. So we get an Arab number. So you get the option of saying, here's what I am, but the census says, these are all the people you want, count them. If you only gave them one option, Arab, you wouldn't get them. But if you give them, you tell me what you are, what you want to be, I'll figure it out. And then we get to put them in the only fight we've got right now is with the black community over what do we do with Sudan and Somalia? They want to count black. We want to count them Arab. So this is why the race and ancestry two-tiered works. They get to put black and they get to put ancestry Sudan. So blacks will count them as a black and we'll get to count them as Arab because they'll put Sudan or Somalia and we get to count them because we count all 22 Arab League countries in that mix, plus other variations on the theme if people end up putting down.
So what I'm hearing also is part of the problem is us as a community. Some people, maybe some of the older generations don't want to say Arab.
Yeah.
And in doing and not saying Arab, we lose the numbers then. So this is an option you're saying that gives everybody the opportunity to participate and then allows the census to then extrapolate those numbers about Arab being counted, those that want to do it, those that don't want to do it. And you think that's the best way to identify?
Put them all into one bag and count them all for ourselves. Right.
All right.
Exactly the way it works. And you can't kind of blame the people who came. Look, my father, there were 5 brothers. One came with an Ottoman passport and was Turkish. One came with a Syrian and the other came as Lebanese. So, I mean, still the largest club, the largest grouping organization of people of Arab descent in the country is the Southern Federation of Syrian Lebanese Clubs. They all came over before World War I. They're the descendants. Syrian Lebanese was how they called themselves, still do. I'm not writing them out. I'm not willing to exclude them from my count because they're not woke and say Arab. You know, they're not from the post-Nasser, post-Ba'ath, whatever generation. And so, the question, you have to finesse this. Now, the other part of this issue is whether or not Arab is a race. And it is not a race. It's just not a race. I mean, it's not a race either in the physical sense with, red hair, freckle face Syrian kids versus, obviously African-looking Egyptian and Sudanese. Where's the race in that, right? And are Circassians in Jordan and Syria, are they Arab? And if they are, so let's not be too woke about this and get to the point where we want to use a racial category. It's not a race here. We're talking about an ethnicity, and it's a shared culture based on a common language and a common heritage that is beyond race, that is multiracial. And so give people the option of doing race and then doing ethnicity. And then in every one of its variations, right, is an American success story. And what we don't need to do is put ourselves in the position of competing with those who've been our allies in the Black community for affirmative action because we're discriminated against. Our story is fundamentally different than theirs. And I believe affirmative action needs to be fixed, but it doesn't get fixed by adding more and more groups who don't belong. The Indians don't belong in it. The people from India don't belong there. The Chinese don't belong there. systemic discrimination, Black, and to some extent Latino. Although, look, there's Zogby's in Mexico. Carlos Slim, his chief of staff is a Zogby, right? If he comes to America, does he get affirmative action? The answer, he shouldn't, but he would. That's wrong,
Right.
and we have to fix this problem. But you don't fix it by adding more people to the mix, by demanding that we get part of the pie. The pie belongs to those who have been systemically discriminated against. That's not us.
All right, Jim Zogby, you are an Encyclopedia Britannica of Arab American history. And I'm going to tell you, I learned more from you, even though I've been so close with you and your organizations over the years. I continue to learn from talking with you, and I definitely have to get you back on to drill down into some of these topics because they're fascinating and our community needs to hear it. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm sure some folks are going to be upset with the affirmative action thing, but hey, if you don't ruffle some feathers, you don't get anywhere, right?
Well, I tell you what, I promise you we'll bring you back so we could explore that a little bit more.
Great. Take care.
All right. I want to tell everybody, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have some concluding remarks. I'm Ray Hanania. We will be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Were you recently at the emergency room, urgent care, or at your doctor's office being told you need a hand, wrist, or elbow specialist? At the Katranji Hand Center, we offer the latest techniques in hand, wrist, and elbow care. From sports injuries to work injuries to everyday hand, wrist, and elbow problems, the specialists at Katranji Hand Center are here to get you back on track. Call us in Troy today at 248-869-4263 or visit us at katranjihandcenter.com to schedule your appointment today.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most. And make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
And welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show. I want to thank everybody for listening. I thought that interview with Jim Zogby was phenomenal. I also want to thank our two guests from the Pew Research Center, demographer Jeffrey Passel and researcher Mohamad Moslimani, for giving us an explanation as to why and how the Arabic language is growing in popularity in the United States. It's becoming very, very popular when you look at the data that is being collected here in the United States. So listen, we're here every Wednesday at 5 p.m. and I hope you join us again next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here at WNZK AM 690 radio in Detroit and WDMV AM 700 in Washington, D.C., where we're going to have another look at some of the issues and the news in the Arab American community. You can get more information on me, by the way, at hanania.com. And of course, I hope you follow my columns and my writing at arabnews.com, which is the Arab News is the leading English language newspaper in the Middle East. If you want to understand what's going on in the Middle East, and I've been in journalism more than 45 years, almost 50 years, a half a century, I have to say that Arab News, and I'm there because I want to be there, is the best source for information on what's happening, not just in the Middle East, and the Arab world, but also what's happening in the Arab American community, which is the focus of what our show, the Ray Hanania radio show here on the U.S. Arab Radio Network, sponsored by Arab News, focuses on. So again, it's just a pleasure to be able to do this. And I want to thank everybody over at WNZK for all the work they do and support that they provide, including Layla Hosseini, who is just an icon in the Arab American community, and our producer in Detroit at WNZK AM 690, Mike Chubka, and Hernan Molina, our producer in Washington, D.C. We're trying to build this station, and we are doing it. You can get more information again on me at www.hanania.com. We're going to take our final break, which I missed at the very beginning of the radio show. That was my problem. But I want to wish everybody a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Let's go to this final break, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you, everybody.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.